Alright, so the next thing we're going to take a look at here is setting up our geogrid parameters in our name list and also running geogrid to get our grid of information built. So first thing we need to do is change into our WPS directory. So right now we're in our home directory, so we're just going to move to local with a cd command, change directory to local/WPS. Now, a nice thing about Linux here, in case you're not familiar with it, is just if you want to go to a directory, let's say we type in LOC and I hit tab, it's going to complete the name. When you're doing terminal commands, you want to make sure that you don't have any errors. Because if you run the wrong thing in this simulation, you're going to get bad results, or it's just not going to work at all. So it's a good idea when you're doing this to just make sure that you're actually using the right directories. So just instead of typing out the full name, just tab complete and let it complete it for you, because then you know you have the right names. And it is case sensitive, so if you type in a capital L on accident, it won't tab complete, so you know you're wrong. So you go back and you switch. So like for instance, if I type in LOC with a capital L and I hit tab a couple times, nothing's going to happen. But if I go back and I hit LO, tab, it'll complete. So we're going to move to local and WPS. Now notice if I hit just a capital W, there's a couple things that come up. I get WPS and you can see all the different directories that I've created for these. And so we're going to go to WPS. So cd local WPS, hit enter, and now you change directory. You can also see here that we can see what directory we're in before this $sign. So this tilde is your home directory. So you're in your home/local/WPS, which is exactly where we want to be. Now after we've ensured that we're in the WPS directory, we want to go ahead and edit our namelist.wps. We can do this by simply going to this file browser, opening the WPS directory, and as soon as that is done, we can see down here, if you just hit N, it'll bring us down to these different name lists, and you can see I have different ones set up, and you can save these. But the one we're interested in running, the one that geogrid is going to use when it's actually running the executable geogrid.exe, is it's going to be looking at this namelist.wps. So this is the one we want to be changing parameters in. Alright, so the two that we're interested in, the two sections, and you can see a section starts with an ampersand and then a name, and then it ends a section by having a little ACK, or a slash, rather. And so this little section here, the share section, and also the geogrid section, are the two sections that geogrid.exe is going to be using. So we can see we have a max domain here set to 1. That's what we want for this simulation. We only want one domain. So we have start dates here, which we also want to set, and it's 9/5/2011, starting at 12 p.m. And this second date here is for a second domain. We really don't need to worry about that, but and actually we could just get rid of it. But if you did have a second domain, like if we had a max domain of 2 here, that would be processed. So if you have these secondary domain, the parameters for that second domain listed, make sure you only have domains set to 1. Otherwise, it's gonna try to run multiple domains. And in this case, we only want 1. If you want to run 2 domains, that's fine. Or if you're using nested domains, that's fine. But for this case, we only want to set to 1. So make sure these dates are correct. In our simulation, we're going to be running for 5 days. So we're going to go from the 5th to the 10th. And we're just going to go from the 12 p.m. to 12 p.m. So, and this interval should be set to 10,800 seconds, which is what we have it at already. So just go ahead and leave that as is. And then geogrid is going to set up our grid, our data grid, what it's going to be looking at. So all the parameters here currently are set to what they need to be set to. If you want details on what they mean, go look at the WPS documentation. There's a ton of settings for each one of these that you can customize. So for the purposes of this simulation, we want them set just how they are. And this is going to be for a simulation above Bozeman, which is where we come up with these latitudes and longitudes. And these are going to set up our intervals and how big our simulation change in domain is going to be. So once you get that all set up, go ahead and hit Control S or just hit Save. And once that little asterisk disappears, you know this is set up right. So if you were going to change something in here, like if you want to change it to the 6th, you notice that that star shows up. before you're done and you run geogrid, make sure that star goes away and everything in here is how you want it. Alright, so now that we have that set up, we're going to go back to our WPS terminal window. We're going to use this one down here later for WRF. So let's go ahead and leave that one alone for now. So in our WPS terminal window, we want to run our plot grids function. And we don't actually need to do this, but what it's going to allow you to do, and I'm just going to show you how to do it. And notice I'm going to tab complete just to make sure I'm getting the right one. And so now I'm going to run /util/plotgrids.exe. And what that's going to do is create a plot meta file for an NCAR graphics package, which we can use. Let's go ahead and call IDT space gmeta. And what that's going to do is bring up just a little window that allows us to look at our domain now. And then you hit play and it'll show you the domain. Now in our case, our domain is small enough that we're not going to see any state borders. If you were to actually zoom out and do a larger domain set, you would actually see the borders of states and whatnot here. And you can modify that too to make it different. So let's go ahead and close that. And again, you don't need to do this. I'm just showing you how to do it so that you're aware of it. And then we're actually going to run geogrid. Okay. So we're going to do that by doing /geogrid.exe. Now that /, in case you don't know, is actually just saying go and work in the current working directory. Or the current directory rather, not the current working directory. So the directory that you're currently in, you want to call this command from that directory. And that's just in case you have a geogrid that's in your path or something. So if I just type geogrid.exe and hit enter, it might actually run a different geogrid program than the one I want. I want it to run the one that's in this directory I'm in the WPS directory. So go ahead and hit enter. And now you can see it'll process through all the domains, which in this case is only one, and it's going to parse entries in the geogrid table, and it's going to give you all these different variables. So it's basically going to set up how our data is going to be stored once we actually run ungrib and grab all of our data, because we only want certain ones, certain pieces of data. So, all right, and the next thing we're going to do is set up ungrib.